there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Welcome to this week's episode of I Never Knew But My Dog Did podcast. So happy to have everyone here today. Again, I'm redundant. I own it. Don't come for me because I love it. And when I say I'm redundant, it's because every guest that comes across my screen is fantastic. And I always think I'm going to run out of topics. And then I don't. And I'm glad that I don't. And today's guest, I was so thrilled when I saw his profile and he reached out in a message to be on the podcast. And I thought, this is something we haven't covered. And his approach to it is amazing. So today I'm talking to Mark Cheverton. And he's formerly a high school math and physics teacher. He's written, oh my gosh, okay, hold on, guys. He's written 27 action adventure novels for kids aged 7 to 13. I've written 3 books, and one of those being now a children's book. 27. I can't even fathom that, but that's amazing. It's his destiny and it's his purpose. These books have appeared on the New York Times, USA Today, and Publishers Weekly bestsellers lists and have been published in 31 countries across the globe. And there are over 2 million copies in print. His latest book, Facing the Beast Within, will be his 27th novel and deals with anxiety in kids. This I love. So Mark wrote his first novel because his son was cyberbullied while playing Minecraft. His goal was to teach him that bullying was not his fault. And just for fun, he self-published his book on Amazon, and the book made it to number 29 on Amazon's top 100 for all books. That is a huge accomplishment, trust me. His most recent novel was inspired by his son's struggle with anxiety. While writing the book, he worked with a team of child psychologists and integrated their anxiety coping strategies throughout the story. So with a very, very warm welcome, thank you for being here, and hello, Mark.
Thank you, Maureen. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
This is fantastic. And we were talking offline before we started, and my book that I wrote that I'm publishing is 0 to 6, and yours covers 7 to 13. So between the two of us, listeners, we got your kids covered.
We got the whole market.
It's right. We're starting them off right. So here on I Never Knew, we always start off with what I call a knee story. So, those moments that really bring you to your knees and you feel kind of hopeless, out of control, something's not working. I think the anxiety and the bullying with your son has got to be a really good starting point for us in your knee story. Tell us what was going on with your son that you saw.
Yeah, so our son was, like many 7-8-year-olds, obsessed with Minecraft. And we got him his own server so he could have his friends play with him. And, he's a shy kid. So if he wanted to play with kids, we were all for that. And it was really terrible. A couple of boys. So he invited the entire internet to his server, which in hindsight was probably a mistake. But he did that, and a couple of kids came on and they were really nice to him. And they were really knowledgeable about Minecraft, and my son was a novice. So they taught him lots of great stuff until finally my son made them administrators. It's called opping somebody. I don't know what opping means, but he opped them on the server, so they had full control. And that night they came on and they destroyed everything. And they flattened everything. They destroyed it so you couldn't easily fix it. And they made a video of it and they called him just as vulgar, terrible names, made a video for YouTube, sent him the link. Thank you very much. And he was just so distraught. And they came back again and again and again. And the only way we could stop it was to just get rid of the server.
Oh my
And
God.
he asked me, this was the moment that he asked me, what did I do wrong to deserve this? And I said nothing, and he didn't get it. And before this, I actually started my writing career before this. When he was about 3 years earlier, I started writing some books. I decided I wanted to write. I love science fiction and fantasy. I wrote 4 science fiction novels for kids, and they were catastrophic failures. I mean, they just cratered the earth when they hit. The first book had 253 rejections when I stopped counting. The rejections kept coming in. I just stopped. I stopped hoping and wrote 3 more books, and those were just total failures. So I was ready to give up. And then this came up, and I knew I had to teach him that this wasn't his fault. Yeah. And so I wrote that next book, and he got it. He realized those kids are probably, bullied at home, and this is how they lash out, or bullied at school. And because I made the character a bully in the book, and he goes from being a bully to being a good guy at the end. But you learn about why he's a bully, because he feels alone and nobody trusts him.
Oh my gosh, my heart just expanded 3 sizes because it's so hard. We as adults, we really want validation from our peers, coworkers and, friends. But when you're at that age, such a tender age, you're getting away from mom and dad and you're expanding your social circle, and that is everything to you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain that to kids because they place their identity in that and they're learning who they are. Yeah. And then you have these kids that do that. It's so damaging. And to have a parent like you that said, hey, let's come at this from a different place. Understand it has nothing to do with you. Now, the anxiety, did it cause the anxiety right away during the bullying, and has that continued, and what kind of help did you try to seek?
So the bullying started in about 2nd grade. I think that was before I wrote this first Minecraft book. So it was already there. He was complaining about stomach aches and headaches, and he would take one of those ear thermometers, and those old ones 10, 12 years ago, well, you get a different number every time you do it, right? Okay. So he would do it. Nope, do it again. Nope, do it again. Eventually, he got 99 degrees. You see, I'm sick. When probably he was heating up the inside of his ear by pushing it in and taking it out, I bet.
Right.
But, his anxiety was creating these physical manifestations in his body. And when we realized, we took him to his pediatrician, and they said, well, maybe it's that. Ding, it went off that, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. And he was in fight or flight mode, and his body was giving him an excuse to flee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the anxiety just grew worse and worse. We went to therapists. We tried multiple therapists. We tried an art therapist once, hoping that would work. We kept trying something. We did the dance with the meds. That's a terrible experience because you try a med, you don't know if it's going to work. You get no relief. Okay, so you got to wait 6 weeks or so and then ramp up. Wait another 6 weeks, ramp up, keep going till you get to the max. Doesn't work. Now you got to ramp back down. And 6 months later, our son has gotten no anxiety relief at all.
Oh, gosh,
and you're watching him suffer all this time.
Yeah.
So we did that dance for multiple meds, and that till finally, when he was in 7th grade, they said, we need to try the next med, and this is a really strong one. This is what we give psychotic patients to make them not so stabby. And we thought, yeah, we're going to pass. And we pulled him out of school. I quit my job as an engineer, and I homeschooled him. And as soon as we pulled him out of school, the anxiety nearly evaporated. It was remarkable.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Listeners, how many of you can relate to that? Because I know that I can. I know the medication part of it, myself raising an ADHD son, same thing with the medication. You just have
Yep.
to keep upping it and upping it. And I remember my son, vocalizing this. If I don't take my meds, I'm in fast forward. If I do take them, I don't feel like
I'm
myself.
I'm a zombie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just,
It's
oh,
the same with depression meds. It's the same with bipolar meds,
yeah.
right? It's such a hard thing to treat with pharmacology. But what are you going to do without the meds? It's too hard of a battle for anybody to face.
Yeah. And thank goodness for you and for being a parent that says, it's more than this. It's more than just chemistry, because we say, oh, chemical imbalance, we need to throw this medication at it.
Right.
Um, and I love that you gave him that option. And that's really the key with children. We have to understand they need to have options and they need to have choices. And I think a lot of times kids do end up with anxiety because they don't feel they have control
Yeah.
over their own life. And when you
Yep.
said, let's homeschool, school does not feel good for you, let's do something different, and it changed for him. And the relatability of your books, I mean, how proud he must be of his father that he gets it. So many parents just don't get it. My son was also oppositional defiant and was on an antipsychotic,
Mm-hmm.
behavioral control. Uh, we do the best we can as parents. And I'm not beating anybody up, and I'm not going to beat myself up, because you and we did the best we could at the
Yep.
time with something we had no idea what this was about. And I'm so pleased that you're here, so anyone going through that gets that experience that we had to do better for their child. And
Yep.
I think that's fantastic. So how old is your son now?
He's 20. He's a junior in college studying computer science, and he is just killing it. He is thriving. But
Wow.
let me tell you, the first day of college was scary because we removed the anxiety trigger. And what we learned while we were seeing, the last person we were seeing was a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and she was managing his meds. And she said, I think he has post-traumatic stress disorder. And something happened at school, who knows what. He could never tell us. He didn't know what it was he was afraid of. But she said that in very naive terms, because I didn't understand about the brain and the chemicals and all of that. But she said post-traumatic stress is a chemical injury of the brain, that you have hormones in there that your body has put there because it's in fight or flight mode, and they can't get out of the brain until you remove the stressor, so you're not in fight or flight mode. And so when we took him out, I think his brain had a chance to heal and be normal again. But then the first day of college, we're like, what's going to happen? This is really scary. And nothing. He was fantastic. He had no
Wow.
symptoms of anxiety. He went to class. He was happy. It was fantastic.
I just love that. I'm so happy for him. I want to hug him. I just, when you see that there's overcoming, and that's what this podcast is about, is learning from people who have overcome and gotten through it. It's just such a beautiful thing to be on the other side. And one of the most important things that I've been teaching my grandson, who also suffers from anxiety, are coping mechanisms,
Yep.
because we can change an environment, but that's not always going to make the difference. I mean, it may
Right.
help, it's a factor, but the coping mechanisms are really a key
Yep.
factor.
Because you're never cured, right?
Yeah, right. What
You
did
you
you
just
teach your son about
so
coping?
we used a lot of um, just distraction techniques that I tried to teach him to meditate. I'm a huge fan of meditation. We did that once, and he had a violent reaction to it because everything was quiet and all he could focus on was himself and his own thoughts, and it just magnified his fears.
Yeah.
And so that was a problem. And so we then tried distracting him while we're getting ready for school. I'm telling him funny stories and I'm joking with him. And we'd get in the car and we'd listen to music. He really enjoyed the soundtrack to Little Shop of Horrors, which I think who doesn't enjoy that soundtrack? It's such a great piece of music. And we'd listen to audiobooks going in and just trying to keep him grounded and focused on something else. And that works for a while until it doesn't, like everything else, right?
Yeah.
And so we would try to do that as much as we can, but it just got to a point that he was so upset. The breaking point for me was when we had the school's head of psychological services meeting us every day to help get him into school. And one time I called her and said, I don't think we're going to make it in. I'm out in the parking lot. And she came out to the parking lot and said, come on, Jack. And she grabbed one arm and she had me grab the other. And we basically carried him into the school. And he's crying and crying. And, you know, he was so upset, and took him into the room. And he's looking back at me and he's just begging me to take him home. He's so upset. I'm about to cry, you know. And so I realized that what we were doing, where he was having these violent emotional outbursts, that can't be helping, right? It can only be making it worse. And so after that, I said, no more. I said, we're not doing that. If he's that upset, I'm taking him home, because this is just making everything worse.
Yeah, reinserting some trauma in there. I mean, it's traumatic enough what he's going through, and then we're now sort of compiling the trauma on with the force tactics.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault. It's you're doing again the best that you can at the time, thinking, well, he has to have an education. What other option do we have? And you found the other option. What you said about the chemistry, the PTSD and the chemistry. So cortisol is a stress hormone that over long periods of time ends up doing damage to our bodies, both mentally and physically. Physical ailments like stomach issues, headaches, pain, all over pain, chronic pain. As we get older and we've been doing this stress thing continuously with no meditation or no coping skills, we deteriorate our physical being and our mental being, obviously. So I love that you recognized that this isn't working. I'm inserting more and I'm not going to do this anymore. And the instantaneous observation you made, where it was like, oh my God, that's all it took, was removing him from that situation.
Right.
And he figured out how to cope outside of that.
Yeah. And so this person was a PhD in psychology, and, you know, we're naturally intimidated by that. And she's telling me she knows, force him in, he'll be upset, but the time he'll be upset will get less and less and less until it goes away. That was not the case. And this was the only tool left in their arsenal, so they didn't know what else to do. And so I stopped bringing him in. They had a meeting. They started having teachers tutoring him after school. And I'd bring him in at 3:00. And that worked for a while until it didn't. And then he couldn't get in to do that. And so finally we said, nope, you're pulling him out.
I found in my coaching, I don't do children. Maybe I should, because I feel like I get them. I get children and dogs more than anything. So maybe I should go to children. But I have found, and tell me if you agree with this, I have found that I used to lecture my kids, when I was younger. And now that I'm raising my grandson, of course, I'm so wise now. I know everything. But what I have found that's different, that's working, because I now have a grandson with ADHD and I had a son with ADHD. What I have found now that's different raising my grandson is choices. I give him choices, and I also encourage solution. So I'll say to him, okay, that's really a problem, and I know that's really upsetting you. And he'll text us all day long what he's going through, and I'll say, let me know how you get through that, or let us know what you found was a good solution. And it's almost like there's only one expectation: you can get through this.
Right.
And he does. What do you think about that? Are choices a good idea?
Yeah, they actually criticized me, the psychologist at the school, that we'd go in and they'd say, we'd get him in the front door, but he's really upset. And okay, now your only choice is we got to go to class. And I would say, no, that's not your only choice. If you don't think you can make it, we're going to go home. And they would get so angry with me because they'd say, you can't give him choices like that. And I would say, you can't have him hysterical in tears and think he's going to have a good experience.
Right.
It won't. And so he was, I think, old enough that this was in seventh grade. He knew what he can do and what he couldn't do. And if he couldn't do it, it was going to be bad. And maybe by lunchtime, he'd stop crying. That's a long time to be crying for anybody. And so I was a fan of giving him a little more control.
I think that's fantastic. By not giving him a choice, you actually insert more trauma.
Yeah,
That's
you amplify the anxiety because now his fears feel true.
Yes.
And that's the thing with anxiety that I emphasize in the book, is the fears are a lie. And that's something I never realized at the time I needed to be talking with my son about, that the fears are not real, they're a lie, and they're not going to last forever. Because those were the two things that I learned kids with anxiety think. The fears are real and they're going to last forever. And how am I going to survive this?
Yeah. Oh, wow. And that is anxiety. I mean, that's the very bottom core foundation of anxiety is fear of the unknown.
Yep.
And the unknown is not having a choice in the
Yeah.
matter. And I love that you integrated that into the books, and I want to dive deeper into that. So you consulted with these child psychologists, and tell us how you integrated it, yet it still engages children who are going through these types of things.
So I gave them the book when I had finished writing it. We have a friend my wife teaches at a college, and she had a student who majored in psych and got a PhD and started her own practice. That's Dr. Jen in the book. And so I consulted with her on all of the books I've written, because every book I write has some theme. Like the first Minecraft book is about bullying because of my son's incident. The next one is about anxiety, and the next one's facing your fears and sibling relationships. I recognized early on that I had a megaphone here that I can talk to kids with, and I don't want to ruin that opportunity and tell them things that I think they ought to think about. So I asked Jen, can you look at this? And I told her what the book was about, and she said, I'll give it to everybody in my practice and we'll all look at it and we'll all give you feedback. And the thing that was really valuable is they gave me lots of other strategies that I didn't know about for coping with anxiety, but they also added the terminologies that they would use with their patients. And so now when a kid's reading the book, they're going to hear what their therapist is telling them echoed in this story. But
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be an info dump, right? Everybody hates an info dump. And so instead, I used the main character, Cameron. I used his character arc of him having trouble confronting his fears as the vessel to insert those coping strategies. I'd put him in a difficult place, and then he would go through all this internal messaging, because that's what kids with anxiety do, is they're thinking about it in their head, and they're lost in their head rather than in what's around them. And I use that to deliver these coping strategies and the lessons from the therapist.
Wow. It's fantastic because, in their lives, they're being lectured to by teachers and psychiatrists and mom and dad. And like you said, no info dump. It's relatable. And now they read a book and they feel this sense of, I'm not alone. Someone wrote about this and they get it.
And that's me, right?
Yes, that's what's fantastic about it. I think about that when it comes to song lyrics. When I
Mm-hmm.
hear a song that touches me, I think that person went through that exact same thing that's evoking that emotion in me.
Right.
And that's what you did with these wonderful books, and the relatability for these kids to finally feel understood and seen, and without being lectured to, but feeling like they have a friend in your character.
Right. So I tried to make Cameron as relatable as possible because, and I think I've developed a knack for that from writing 27 books. Um, that they root for Cameron. They want him to be successful. They want him to master his anxiety, and that has to transfer over to them, to the kid somehow, to the reader. That they're going to see themselves in that, and hopefully they're going to see what Cameron does to confront his beast, and maybe they'll try the same thing. I hope.
Yes, I love it. And I'm going to go into life coaching mode for a minute. When you said your first books were catastrophic, it's through those experiences of quote unquote failure, which I don't feel anything is a failure in writing. If you
Well,
wrote it, it
it
was
certainly felt like it. Let me tell you.
I know. And any of us who are authors, we never go out there hoping, or not hoping, but expecting to make $1 million. And if you are writing expecting that, you're
You're
probably
in for a painful lesson.
yes. And I love though that you also entail the theme of ink, which is you just kept writing. You didn't stop. And those experiences that we go through that bring us to the next place. I had to go through what I did to become this life coach to be able to help others. So you did that. You found a purpose in Jack's pain,
Yep.
in Jack's suffering, and what a gift that people give us. I always say, like, Jack is your greatest teacher, isn't
Yep.
he?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And he's certainly the most courageous person I know, because he was facing this turmoil every morning, knowing what was coming, and he was still trying. I mean, it's brutal.
Yeah, he didn't give up. He didn't give
No.
up. And the point being, he didn't give up because he had a father who wanted to understand him. He had a father who cared to say, I want to figure out what works for you. And we do have a lot of teen suicide. We have a lot of children that have these feelings, and they feel so helpless and hopeless
Yeah.
that they give up on life, and especially bullying. Let's talk about bullying for a second, because it's something I haven't covered yet here.
Right.
Tell me what you understand to be because you've done so much on this in your books, which I love, and how you explained to Jack why they were doing what they did. Tell us what you think is the background between why children bully one another.
So, first of all, I notice the bullies are never alone, but the victim is. Right? Inherently, the bullies are cowards, because if they have a group around them, people are less likely to step in and say, hey, don't be a jerk. Right?
Yeah.
But, from what I've studied, that I after I wrote this book, I didn't know anything about bullying other than I've been a recipient when I was a kid. That people are lashing out because they don't feel like they have any control, or they're a victim of bullying. They're picked on by a sibling. Maybe the parents have something going on there and they're kind of being mean to them. And this is a way to lash out with your anger and also feel like you're in control of something when you're the victim. You have no control at all.
Yeah. And low self-esteem.
Yeah. Low self-esteem is a big deal for that.
And I think we carry bullying into adulthood too. You have people, I'm sure we've all known, excuse me, we've all known a bully at work. We've all known a bully, in a social circle, where they thrive on making you look worse or feel worse because they think it elevates them. And if it wasn't addressed, that they were a bully, and I think they instill fear. And if we don't address that, I think they carry it on through life. And I know a lot of people that say, well, that's just how they are. And they allow
Yeah.
that behavior to continue. What do you think would be beneficial in our schools to help children with, first of all, accountability of the bullying? And I know they're really anti-bullying and they say that they have things in place,
Yeah.
but also anxiety. What are some things that the schools can maybe help with?
So we had mentioned before we started that the CDC says 20% of the kids have anxiety in, and so that's what the schools are dealing with in schools, in classrooms. And the teachers are not necessarily prepared for that. And to train the teachers, yeah, I don't know how you deal with that. I had a student one year that had severe anxiety, and sometimes I'd look up and she's just in tears in the back of the classroom. And I don't know what to do. I can't just let her sit there and weep. Everybody knows she's doing it, but nobody's looking at her. Sometimes people would cast a glance, but I feel like I got to do something. So I would take her out of class and we'd sit in the hallway and we'd talk until she calms down. But now I've left my classroom unsupervised. And if a fight breaks out or somebody gets hurt and I'm not in the classroom, I'm in serious trouble. I'll probably lose my job. And I don't know how to deal with that. And I know there's talk about President Biden has some big initiative on dealing with mental health in schools, and they're trying to do some things. I don't know much about that. I should, I suppose. Um, but to train all the teachers is a Herculean task, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
cost of that is off the charts. And I don't know what you would give to teachers when they have to manage the whole class, but 20% of them have anxiety. It just seems like such a monumental task. I don't know how it's manageable.
Yeah, that's really well, and unfortunately, the classrooms are oversized anyway. So,
Sure.
a teacher is already maxed out with being able to give attention. There's not a lot of one-on-one. Um,
Yep.
I I know that my grandson had mentioned going to a school that is like a Montessori school,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no tuition. But it is a smaller classroom because he doesn't care about the sports. He doesn't really care
Yeah.
about dances or anything.
But it's a
Um,
smaller classroom, but he has more control,
yes,
right?
that's it. And I gave him the option, and he's been doing so well that he actually said, I think I might stay over here at this one. So he's making that
Wow.
decision. He's making the choice. He's learning to cope, and he's just fantastic. And I think, and it might be sidebarring a little bit, but I think that a lot of children today are highly sensitive. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like my generation and your generation, we were kind of like shut up and put up, and
Yeah. Just do
we
it.
we don't really care how unhappy you are. I mean, really,
Right.
I don't think my parents cared if I was happy or not. They just cared if I was in the right
Right.
place.
But the educational system is the same as the one we grew up in,
Yeah,
right? That
yeah,
hasn't changed for all the kids on the spectrum, all the kids with anxiety and ADHD. It hasn't adapted there,
mm,
which is a challenge because there's so much inertia there of lots of older teachers that have been doing it this way for 20 years. They aren't going to change. And schools are expensive. And are you going to make more schools with smaller classrooms? What politician's going to offer up to raise your property taxes to pay for that, right?
yeah,
If they do,
right.
they're done.
Oh my gosh, you're absolutely right. And you make such a good point that the system hasn't grown with the needs of the children. That it hasn't changed with what the changes are necessary for today because children are they're also allowed to speak more freely of what's going on, which that I love. I think we've
Yeah.
done great as a mental health advocate myself. I think allowing people to speak more freely about it is helpful, and if we had a space in schools where they could just leave and go speak about it and go back to class, that it didn't interrupt the rest of the kids and the teacher, that would be great. Like, I'm just going to say have a resident life coach in every school, but then that's me. And then the other solution I have for the funding is let's just take the salaries that professional sports people play, and let's just take like a quarter of their salary and let's just add that into the school system, and nobody has to come up with any
Yeah.
taxes.
But the funny thing is they've looked at school districts that spend the most money and those kids don't get the most benefit. There isn't a link because they're still using the old model, I suspect.
Yeah, yeah. So the money went somewhere else.
Yeah, or it just they weren't putting the money into the right thing to address whatever the problem was for that school.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this as a parent of someone who had a child that had needed these extra accommodations. There is the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, provides an IEP, which is an individual education plan, and a 504 that if you feel that your child needs additional assistance, you can speak to your principal, to the counselor, and say, hey, I really need to look into getting these accommodations for my child. They're struggling, and if he needs to go sit over in the corner and just read for 5 minutes to regroup, we have to let him do that, or whatever it is, go sit in the office and just take a breather. Yep. There are accommodations for that. Legal wise, you are allowed to ask for that for your child.
And you need to keep asking.
Yes.
Because the school only has so many resources and they don't want to give up everything, and they'll try to not to be malicious, but they'll try to beat you down a bit because they don't want to give up too much because they only have so much money and they can only do so much. And so people who are trying to get an IEP and are working out the terms of the IEP, you have to keep pushing because you're the advocate for your child.
Yeah, that was a struggle, I have to say. Getting that diagnosis, from the pediatrician, the psychiatrist, getting the diagnosis first is key, listeners. And second of all, you do have to advocate. And not everything that they suggest or say is gospel. You have a right to refuse and say, no, that's not going to work for my child. And again, the rights through the ADA, mental health struggles can be a disability in the eyes of the ADA. And you can say, no, I know what works for my child, and these are the accommodations that I need. And most schools want the best for your child. So I mean, you're not, there are some schools that I think, like you said, they're exhausted. They don't have the funding.
Resource strained.
Yeah. But it's, in the end, the only thing that matters is your own child, and no one will advocate the way that you do for that child. So I just think this is so fantastic. So I want you to share with everyone where to find your novels, where to find you if they want to comment or contact you. And just, I want you to toot your own horn right now because you deserve it after 27 novels.
So you can find my books anywhere online. If you type my name, Mark Cheverton, on Google, you'll get a million hits. But they're on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Lulu, all the different online sites. They're everywhere, including Facing the Beast Within. Nice. So they're not hard to find. If you go to my website and you click on themes on the top of the site, you'll see all the themes for all of my books. And I like telling that I had a parent reach out to me and say, their child really loves my books, but they always see the negative in life and they never see the positive. And do you have any advice or anything? And, what do I know about that? I said, I don't know. I made something up, tried to help them. But I told them, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to make my next book about that. And so the next theme was about trying to see the positive rather than the negative in life. And I wrote that book, and then I sent her son a copy and signed it. And maybe that helped. I don't know. But you can see all the themes there. I know for me, when we were going through this with my son, my therapy was I was writing these Minecraft books. I was on a contract that I don't know why I'd agreed to this. I had to give them a book every other month. And so I was just typing with fire coming out of my fingers, right? I, I did that for like 2 years. I never got sick. I don't know how I didn't get sick, but I just wrote all the time. And when I look back at the books that were in the darkest part of my son's anxiety, those were the darkest books too. I was releasing my emotions there, and that helped me a ton. And I wonder if that wouldn't help kids who were struggling with anxiety. When I started writing my Minecraft books, the strangest thing happened. Kids started sending me their own stories just out of the blue. And I'd get one, and then two, and then 20, and then 50. And so I've gotten over 1,000 of those that are all on my website on a fan fiction page that you can click on at the top of the screen and see them. And if a kid writes a story and they email it to me, I'll post it on my fan fiction page so that they can see it there.
I love that, because what you said was, in the darkest times I was writing and it helped me. It's an outlet. And
absolutely.
So for these children to be able to write to you and see their story out there and see other stories too is another way that you are helping so many kids say, you're not alone. We're all in this. This is not uncommon. And look, share with everybody else. What a beautiful thing. Now, what is your website address?
MarkCheverton.com. That's Cheverton. And you'll see the fan fiction page at the top. You'll see the themes at the top. You'll see something called Writing Tips, where I started making tips on strategies that myself and other professional authors use in writing their stories. And I'd make a little 10-minute lesson for kids, and I'd make a video and post it there. Quite a few elementary school teachers use these in their classes to teach creative writing. And so those are always there, and they're always free, and people can look at them and then go try to apply that strategy to naming their villain and their protagonist, and then write a story and send it to me.
I love it. From Jack's struggles to you still being able to utilize your teaching as well as the community part of this for the children. And because I write nonfiction, I always admire fiction writers, because to get someone to fall in love with a character and to be so creative, I admire that. And I think that's just a fantastic thing.
It's kind of funny that I admire nonfiction writers because when you're writing nonfiction, you can be wrong. Mm-hmm. And people will come out and not be shy about telling you that you're wrong. But when you write fiction, they could say my story wasn't any good, but they're not going to say I was wrong.
I never thought of it that way. Thank you for that perspective. I've won over 11 awards for my 2 books. I did have only one bad review out of all of them. And it was someone that was quite threatened because they were in the counseling realm and I'm in the life coaching realm, and they were not happy with the success of all my clients, which is terrible to think that someone wouldn't want success.
My bad review was somebody compared my first book to an undercooked microwave burrito. And I wish I could find that review, because it was so eloquently written and it was so offensive, but the writing was fantastic. It just made me laugh.
Maybe they took your writing course.
Maybe so.
Well, you are such a joy. I knew this was going to be an amazing podcast. I knew this was going to be an amazing subject matter. I think you are such a bright light in this world. And, joining me and giving me this hour to myself and my listeners is just such an honor. And I'm always, always grateful for that. So before we leave, since everything's always so heavy content-wise on my podcast, I like to leave it a little bit light. So I have a question for you. I have a little segment, and it's called This Tastes Funny.
Okay.
And I want to know, what is something that you enjoy eating that most people would go, whoa, I've never heard of that. I'm not sure.
Okay, I got something.
Okay, what you got?
Liverwurst.
I love liverwurst.
Do you?
My God. Oh, I grew up on it.
My dad used to eat it. He used to eat sardines too. I never went for sardines. That looked disgusting, but he would share liverwurst with me. I don't
I
know. You're the only person I've ever met who liked liverwurst.
Oh, it's the best. Grandma had it. So my grandma would do a spread. You'd go over to grandma's house, and she's a little German lady. She was 5 foot, nothing, maybe four or something. And her spread, she always put out. In fact, my kids to this day, block cheese, you slice it,
Yep.
block cheese. It's not like the wrapped Kraft slices or
Yep.
whatever. To this day, my children call it grandma cheese
Yeah.
because she always
funny.
had the sliced cheese. And the liverwurst, and I love the liverwurst on.
Were your kids eat it?
Yes, yes, they actually like it. Yeah, with butter. I just like it with butter, or with like mozzarella or Swiss cheese.
Oh, I'll just take a spoonful.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It doesn't last very long, so you got to eat it pretty quickly. My dogs certainly love it. So,
oh, I bet.
If you guys don't know what liverwurst is, it's almost like, I don't know, it's kind of squishy. It comes in a tube.
Kind of a paste.
Yeah, it's like
It doesn't look very natural.
it looks like a squished meat. It's kind of like meat toothpaste.
There you go, meat toothpaste. That's exactly it.
But it's delicious. But I like liver too, and so if people don't like liver, they probably wouldn't.
So that's funny. I've never had liver.
Real
and I
liver.
can't imagine what instance where if you gave me a piece of liver, I would eat it.
Ooh, I bet you I could.
I don't know if I would ever eat it if I knew it was liver, but I love liverwurst, and I know it's the same stuff, right?
I know. I make grilled bacon wrapped chicken livers, and they are like a delicacy. So I could get you to eat liver, I promise you. I gourmet that. Well, thank you so much for being here, listeners. Don't forget, reach out to markcheverton.com. I'm going to have all of his information in the show notes, so I'll make it really easy for you to reach out to him. You've got to go to that website, look for the themes. If you have children 7 to 13, I think it's a must that you get these books.
And I'm going to send you a link
okay,
where parents can download 2 free Minecraft novels that I wrote to get reluctant readers, especially boys, to read that are in that age range. And so parents can go there, and if they have a child 7 to 13, they're not liking to read, but they like Minecraft, which I bet they do. Here's the book. You can give them the PDF or the ebook, and they will love it.
Oh, I love that so much. And make sure, guys, when you go to Mark's webpage, make sure that you mention you heard him on Inc., because we really want to make sure that we are spreading the word, and that maybe we'll even we'll offer that link when you go to his website and mention Inc. I think that would be a fantastic way to bring some people to your website. We need visitors to your website. We'll boost that SEO. Woo!
There you go. Send me an email.
Yes.
Mention Inc. There's a thing on there to send me an email, and you mention Inc., and I'll send you the link to these books.
There you go. I love it. Collab. All right, folks. Well, thank you all for being here, listeners. As always, I am so excited about building this community. We are all 5-star reviews on Apple. I'm so proud of that. We are getting more and more downloads, so we really, really would love to increase this, get some sponsorship. That would be fantastic. If you need any life coaching or any couples coaching, any confidence coaching, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at lifecoachmaureen.com. And my books are for adults, the first 2 books. My dog is more enlightened than I am, and my dog is my relationship coach. And as I sit here today recording this, my book, my 3rd book, my children's book for 0 to 6-year-olds, will be out by Christmas. And that is My Dog Bexley Is Just Like Me. And that's a mindfulness book where we start the little ones out in confidence, in loving themselves, knowing that emotions are okay, and self-care is a good thing. So I'll be definitely advertising that. But again, thank you all for being here. Don't forget our dog boutique for all of your furry babies. We have healthy treats that I make in my very own kitchen. No preservatives, nothing, no xylitol in your peanut butter. It's all healthy for your doggies. And now I make kitty treats as well. Plus we have all kinds of apparel and safety items and just really, really fun things for your puppies. So thank you again for everyone being here today. That's mydogIsEverything.net, by the way. Forgot to mention that. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Most of all, take care of those furry babies. And until next week, I love you all. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.